Welcome back to the preview show, ladies and gentlemen. It's myself, Ian O'Neill, and Harry Powell. We're going to take you through UFC on ABC 5. That's Josh Emmett versus Ilia Topuria in the featherweight division. Goodness gracious, it's Ilia Topuria fight week, but he has a stern test in front of him in Josh Emmett this weekend. A decent card, not too bad. I mean, a couple of good fights here and a couple of interesting matchups that I'm looking forward to talking about. I know you are as well, Harry. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm good, thank you. Really good. I really like this fight card. I think there's a bunch to talk about, but I will just say one first thing, and that's that I want to give props to the UFC. You know, we do enough UFC bashing as it is, and this might be a weird thing to give props for, but I want to give props to the UFC's media team for the posters that they've been putting out recently. Like, we made a complaint maybe 6 months ago or so about that the UFC posters were just a bit naff and they were very same and they were very stock and whatever. And it genuinely feels like that the media team, the PR team have listened, because some of the posters recently have been absolute screamers. And this one is a really, really nice poster.
Yeah, and I agree. And Marvin Vittori and Cannoneers definitely stood out to me last week as well. The dark with the kind of spray paint, kind of graffiti kind of a job. So yeah, fair play to them. I love a good poster. Remember the Pride ones back in the day? A couple of the K1 posters. Very, very good and important as well. You know, catch the eye. And this card does catch the eye. I mean, I am really looking forward to seeing Topuria get that test in the main event. Obviously, Amanda Hebas and Macy Barber is like a coming together of two up and coming prospects in the 125-pound division, started their UFC careers young and have built their way up here, where they're going to try and establish themselves in the top 10 of that division now. Randy Brown coming back from his defeat of Jack Della Maddalena, or defeat from Jack Della Maddalena. I'm excited to see how he rebounds after that as well. Neil Magny, Phil Rowe. I mean, that was kind of interesting until Ian Gary got matched up with Jeff Neal. And yeah, I'm interested to see you look at Gillian Robinson and Tabitha Ritchie, and obviously Tatsuro Tiara in the 125-pound division. Give me all of that. Let's get going on the main event, Harry. Josh Emmett versus Ilia Topuria. And look, at Josh Emmett is coming in off of his title loss, or interim title loss, to Yair Rodriguez. Look, he was pretty dominated in that fight towards the end. I think he had some good moments in round one, but he will be disappointed with the outcome. Yair put in a tremendous performance. It was the first time that he has tasted defeat by the fight being finished. I mean, he's lost unanimous decisions and everything like that in the past, or split decisions. Jeremy Stevenson finished Emmett in 2018. Yair Rodriguez did it again in 2023. It put an end to a very, very good run that Josh Emmett had. Ilia Topuria has been working his way up the rankings as well, obviously flirting with the lightweight division, but a move up from Jai Herbert to good competition, Harry, to Bryce Mitchell, to another big jump up here, and it has to be said. Look, at Josh Emmett looked a little bit slower. He didn't perform to the best of his abilities, but the man is still dangerous, and that's the most intriguing thing. It's that fight-ending power for Josh Emmett that is the real difference between, I feel, if you're looking at outcomes of this fight, maybe to get a little bit ahead of myself, I feel that it would be more of an accumulation of damage over Ilia Topuria would hand out to Josh Emmett. In other words, I'm just buckling my words. I'm going to start again. Here we go. I feel that Ilia Topuria must accumulate a lot of damage over Josh Emmett to get the finish, whereas I feel Josh Emmett can just land one punch and lights can be out in an instant, no matter when the fight is going. And I don't know why it was so hard for me to say that, but I'm going to hand it over to you, good sir, to do a much better job of breaking down this fight in the main event.
The reason why it was so difficult for you to get out is because of the level of excitement that we have and the jeopardy that's involved in this fight. Right? And that's because, Josh Emmett is 39. Now, we have to give full respect to Josh Emmett for his skills, for his ability to stay at an elite level in the latter parts of his age range. Generally, you know, when you're a 145 fighter, you see that sort of elite level capacity diminishes as people get older into their later 30s. And so for Josh Emmett to continue on in the way he has done is a testament to his skills, is a testament to his preparation, is a testament to the lifestyle that he leads outside of fighting. But I do think that the time off after the Jeremy Stephens loss, which was a pretty horrific injury that he took, breaking his orbital and a ton of other bones around his eye, was a real detriment to his career. Now, I say that with all of the notions that he then goes out, stops Michael Johnson, stops Mirsad Bektic, is in an absolute war with Shane Burgos, a war with Danny Ige, a war with Calvin Kattar. And I think that element of it, and by the time this comes out, the Speaker's Corner will not be out yet, but there's a Speaker Corner's coming, which is Damage Part 2, right? And we discuss in there sort of, is the damage taken worth it for a fighter? Is it worth it for the fan? Are we really desensitized to the violence, to the damage that these fighters take? And I think the answer is yes. And I think Josh Emmett is a real example of that, because Josh Emmett is certainly a fan favorite. I think he's certainly somebody with a style that the fans enjoy, because he sits down in his punches. He likes to bomb forward. He's got a really explosive double leg. His ground and pound is very ferocious when he gets it there. And like you've said, he's got one hitter quitter power. And that, from a fan perspective, is something that's really, really attractive and really, really exciting, right?
Yeah, I think more so with Emmett, that is the thing. It's not that. I feel it's the amount of damage that he has taken in recent fights, whereas like I feel deep down he still has the fight IQ, he still has the ability to get off his shots, but his body seems to be letting him down at this stage. And there's only so much you can kind of come back and expect from your body. Like, his 2 knees have been done, he's broken his orbital, he's broken hands, I believe, as well in recent fights. So I guess it's kind of the negative side of fighting with such ferocious power, is that you're looking for that explosive movement that a lot of the times, and you know, sooner rather than later you're going to break down. But I think the question is here, Harry, is he broke down enough, or can he produce something similar enough to what we seen with Jared Cannonier last weekend to kind of dampen the hot streak of Ilia Topuria?
So my read is actually slightly different to yours. I just think that his style is not modern MMA. And I think that really is what we're going to see in this fight, is that Ilia Topuria is the next breed of MMA fighter. And, you know, I've talked about this ad nauseum at this point. So if it isn't well documented, I'll just very quickly run through it here. What I mean by not a modern MMA fighter is that there is a very obvious movement between positions, a very obvious movement between stances, a very obvious movement between styles. Whereas when you look at an Ilia Topuria, the boxing, the wrestling, the grappling, the submission offense, the damage on the ground, the defensive wrestling, all of it is molded into something else. And there's a much more seamless transition to the positions and a much more seamless transition in his movement than when you look at somebody like Josh Emmett. And I just think that now in 2023, that's the bar. That's the standard bar that we are going to see when it comes to breaking into the top 15. And Ilia Topuria is one of the guys that's ushering that new era through. Now, does he have enough? I mean, maybe. We saw last week that Arman Tsarukyan sort of fucked around a little bit and found out. For a hot second, he found out. Because Joaquim Silva was very aware that he wasn't of the same skill level. And so he took, and I don't mean this any disrespectfully, he took the Josh Emmett approach. He just said, okay, I'm going to stay in the pocket and I'm going to look to land a massive shot as and when it presents itself, because it's going to. I am confident that it's going to. And it did, and he landed it. And so I think for Ilia Topuria, it is absolutely imperative that he goes into this without underestimating Josh Emmett's ability and going in with the same level of ferocity that we have seen him do in other fights. Because one of the things that we learned from Arman Tsarukyan is, yes, okay, you can be vastly more skilled than somebody else, but if you give them an inch, this is still high-level MMA, and this is 4-ounce gloves, and anything can happen. So in answer to your question, does Josh Emmett still have the ability in his body to do it? Yes, I think he does. Do I think he will do it? No, I don't. And the reasons for that is based a lot on the A side of Ilia Topuria, and no disrespect to Josh Emmett. I think when you're in MMA right now, as I've said, at this elite level, having really dangerous power and an ability to grapple offensively and a little bit defensively is just not enough.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. I couldn't disagree with that at all, Harry, because I feel some of those kind of gaps in skill set, or Josh Emmett was showcasing his limited kind of skill set based off the old style of mixed martial arts, and Yair Rodriguez was showing a lot of newer attacks and exposing him on the feet as well, getting off first. Obviously, I feel, what would you think Yair Rodriguez's game plan was going out there? Was it to kind of lure Josh Emmett to come forward and maybe try and take the fight down to kind of trap him there? And you'd think that Ilia Topuria will be looking at some kind of the traps that Rodriguez set in that fight and to try and utilize them again in this fight coming forward?
Absolutely not, is the short answer. I don't think in any way, shape, or form that Yair Rodriguez wanted to wrestle. I don't think any way, shape, or form Yair Rodriguez wanted to be on his back. I think that Yair is one of those, like if I was to determine Yair as a grappler, he's a submission artist in that he gives zero fucks about position, doesn't look for them at all, but when he's in precarious positions, he's going to look for submissions to allow him to either create space or obviously submit his opponent, right? Whatever. Ilia Topuria is not that. And we have seen previously that Yair Rodriguez's grappling is his Achilles heel. Now, it wasn't a good look when Josh Emmett was finished by a pretty rudimentary triangle setup, but we have to take into account the level of damage that he'd already taken up until that point, right? And so failing some of that, there's also a notion in grappling, which is like a black belt, when you hit him becomes a brown belt, and then you hit him again, it's a purple belt, and you hit him again, it's a blue belt, and then guess what? You hit him one more time and he's a white belt. So, even the best guys, when you land some of the volume that Yair did, and I think that was the game plan. The game plan was volume. And I think the game plan here for Ilia Topuria is volume. But when I say volume, what I mean very specifically is volume of everything. I mean volume of pressure footwork. I mean volume of feints. I mean volume of head movement. I mean volume of strikes. And I mean a volume in which he is threatening grappling exchanges. Because the way to beat a power hitter is to just never let them set their feet long enough that they can get their shots off. And I feel like what Yair Rodriguez did excellently well is he managed the range and managed the distance so that when Josh Emmett felt like Yair was presenting him an opportunity to come forward, there was some form of teep or a low kick or a straight right or a hook kick or whatever it was that Yair had Josh Emmett walking onto. And then when Emmett decided to be slightly more defensively aware and allow Yair to come to him, well, that's exactly what Yair Rodriguez wanted, because now he's setting the pace and he's setting the volume of striking. I think a very similar thing will happen in the Ilia Topuria fight, in that Topuria will want to set him up as he comes forward with big explosive shots. I think the check left hook from Topuria is going to be massive. The duck under shot is going to be massive. I think clinching is going to be big from Topuria. But I think then what will happen is slowly, he will chip away at Josh Emmett, and Josh Emmett will realize that skill for skill, it's not quite the same. And so there'll be a slight defensive awareness, and Topuria will start to run away with it.
What problems can you see Josh Emmett giving Ilia Topuria, or what kind of questions may he ask Ilia Topuria that he's not been asked before or not seen before inside the octagon?
This is the interesting question, right? Because the real question for me for Ilia Topuria is what happens when he faces adversity. And it was a very similar question to what I had for Arman Tsarukyan. Because for Arman Tsarukyan, he didn't really face adversity against Islam Makhachev. He was never hurt, wobbled, dropped, like in a horrendous position. And similar for Mateusz Gamrot. But we have seen that with Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria was rocked incredibly badly against Jai Herbert, manages to survive, manages to come back and destroys him in the second. Fine. The question for me in this one, and the problem that Josh Emmett poses, is that he cannot make the same mistake again. Because if Ilia Topuria is caught by Josh Emmett and we see him hurt and wobbled, Josh Emmett is a finisher, a far superior finisher to Jai Herbert. No disrespect to Jai Herbert. And so if you allow yourself to be in a situation where Josh Emmett has you rocked, you are in a serious predicament. And so for me, the tests are threefold. The first one is there is a veteran savvy to having had 750,000 fights like Josh Emmett has. The second is his ability to land shots and continue to stick to a game plan when Josh Emmett doesn't go away, because I think that's something that hasn't yet been talked about and should be talked about. Is I agree with you that this is very likely going to be an accumulation of damage. And so does Topuria get slightly disheartened if we're at round 3 and he's battered Josh Emmett from pillar to post and Josh Emmett is still coming forward, biting down on his mouthpiece, throwing absolute haymakers at him? But the last one and the most important one is an IQ test, right? If Ilia Topuria does not stick to his P's and Q's, he's going to take shots here. And that's not what you want to be doing against a guy of the caliber and power of Josh Emmett.
Indeed. I can sense your excitement for this, Harry, and it's making me even more excited. We're both excited about this. Fuck, I could barely even talk at the start of this podcast. But I'll ask you, what are you most excited for before... I'll explain. I'm excited just to see an undefeated prospect go in there and challenge himself to be on the cusp of elite status within the division, because he's been flirting with it for quite some time now. And one might say that this is a little bit too far of a step up the division. I think given the circumstances we've seen lately, this is the perfect test at the perfect time for a guy like Ilia Topuria. And, you know, he still has time if it doesn't go well. He's only 26 years of age. But do you feel that maybe this might be a plan by the UFC to inject new talent into the top of 145-pound division? And maybe I'll ask you that question first.
So what do I think this is? I just think this is elite modern MMA forcing its way through. That's what I think this is. Because we have been in a situation where Josh Emmett is kind of like the Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier of the featherweight division, in that he's good enough to be in and around the conversation always, but he's probably just not good enough to win a title. And now look, there's no shame in that whatsoever. And if you are the third greatest fighter in the world in your weight class for a significant period of time, that is an absolutely unbelievable achievement. Somebody has to be third. And so if it's Josh Emmett, fair play to him, no problem. I think, though, this is just the UFC understands in some part what they have on their hands. They've got on their hands a kid who is willing to talk, is willing to fight, is willing to back up what he wants to say. And equally, there's just an undeniability to when you see elite level fighting. Now, up until this point, Ilia Topuria has looked vastly better than his competition. And this is the big test. Because if you go and beat Josh Emmett, we can actually talk about him in being in a title situation. We could talk about him in a Max Holloway. We can talk about him fighting an Arnold Allen, a Brian Ortega, a Yaya Rodriguez, and Alexander Volkanovski. We can happily and very justifiably talk about him in these sorts of situations. But this, to me, and the reason I'm excited for it, is firstly because I get to see modern MMA played out on the elite level. That, full stop. I don't care who they are. If I get to see elite level MMA, I'm pretty comfortable and pretty happy with that. But the second side of it, and the more personal side to it, is you're right. We get an opportunity to potentially welcome a brand new star into the upper echelon of one of the best divisions in the UFC.
Indeed, it's going to be a fantastic fight. I'm really looking forward to it. And you know what? It's very well matched. It's going to be very competitive on the night. I'm very excited and looking forward to breaking down this fight already next Tuesday on the Balance Breakdown, and we'll go there. But we must go to the co-main event first. and that's Amanda Hebas, who goes in and takes on Macy Barber in the hot 125-pound division now, rich with talent. And we have two prospects here, Harry, that are looking to come in and stake their claim in the top 10. It's a really, really interesting stylistic matchup here. What's the general thoughts of it coming in for yourself? And who are you leaning towards getting the nod here?
It's a very good question at who I'm leaning towards. I think that Macy Barber is a more consistent performer. I think that with Amanda Hebas, like when she's on, you see what she does to Werner Jandiroba. And I have been outwardly quite a fan of Werner Jandiroba. I think she has a really interesting style and she just uses it really, really well. If you go out and lose a split decision to Caitlin Chookagian, I got no problem with that. Right? But again, Caitlin Chookagian is the fighter you absolutely need to be beating if you want to stake a claim at having a spot in that elite level conversation. And then you go out and beat Viviane Araújo the way she did. And we're all pretty high on Viviane Araújo at SevereMMA. And so that's a very impressive win. But I think on paper, I think Amanda Hebas has the stronger names on her resume. However, the more consistent performer, I think, has been Macy Barber. Now, when we look at her losses, you lose to Alexa Grasso. That's aged pretty well. Right? It's aged pretty fucking well. Fine. You lose to Roxanne Modafferi. Well, there's an asterisk on that to say that the knee blew out. And okay, she was losing the fight before the knee blew out, but there's an asterisk available for you if you want it. I think the fight is going to be played out a lot in close quarters. Both of these ladies like to grapple. Amanda Hebas, when she strikes, her elbows are quite high. And so there's an ability for Macy to get under them and start to grapple. Macy Barber is one of those grindy, tough, hard-nosed, will be in your face, knows how she wants to fight and will fight that way. And I have said previously, and I've been critical of that, in that is not the way to get you to an elite level competition. That's the way for you to basically pronounce your A game much, much stronger. But I think when she goes in against Amanda Hebas, this is what I'm excited for, right? If she's not well-rounded enough, we're going to see. If she's been pushed too quickly at 25 years of age, we're going to see. Because Amanda Hebas is no joke on the ground, is happy enough to be there, and this is where I'm excited for this fight.
Yeah. Sorry, my computer is acting up a little bit. Sorry. Both of these women kind of came into the UFC around the same time, and both have experienced in their career so far, you know, a chance to kind of crack the top or the elite of the division, and both have fallen short. So this is kind of both of their second opportunity to kind of come in. Obviously, very well matched by the UFC to only allow one of these women go through, whoever's going to be the winner. The strength battle here, I would have to probably give to Macy Barber. And I think that that's going to play a lot of dividends in this fight, in her being able to control where the fight goes. Because I feel there's going to be a lot of clinch work against the cage here from Macy Barber, where she's going to want to try and beat up and kind of make it ugly. I feel that I think Macy Barber will think that she's the better striker than Amanda Hebas. Coming in here too. And obviously Hebas, you know, we've seen her mix it up on the feet. We've seen mainly she wants to get the fight down and assert her dominance down there. I'm not too sure if she's going to be able to get it done here against Macy Barber. When you've seen the progression of both of these women, Harry, through the UFC, whose progression have you been more impressed with, and who's done the most, who's kind of had the most growth? Because it's been pretty similar. You know, they've had similar levels of growth, they've had similar level tests of competition as well, and now this is kind of the perfect outcome or scenario that you want to see who's kind of, you're probably going to answer that way. We'll see on Saturday night who's developed most. But from what you've seen studying back tape, who do you feel has the biggest ceiling, would you think?
Oh, well, that's a different question. So I think the fighter that's progressed more is probably Amanda Hebas. And the reason why I say that is she was coveted in KSW. The violence queen, the this, the that, the next thing. She comes in to a whimper, really, in the UFC. Really not a fantastic opening stanza to her UFC career. And yet, she's now managed, as we've said, I think she has the stronger strength of schedule, right? You go out, you beat Paige Van Zandt, is whatever. Losing to Marina Rodriguez, Absolutely no problem in that. You lose, you go out and you beat Werner Jandiroba. Big fan of Werner Jandiroba. You go out and beat, have a close fight with Caitlin Chookagian. You go out and beat Viviana Araujo. Like, that to me shows a level of progression that surpasses the criticisms that I have had of Maycee Barber's fighting style previously, which is that it's great when it works. And it's great to nullify certain opportunities, but it's like a mid-level to a slightly higher upper echelon level of fighting style. You don't get away with that against an Alexa Grasso. Obviously, we've seen it. You don't get away with that against the Valentina Shevchenko. You don't get away with that against the Caitlin Chookagian, right? And so what I wanted and was pushing in conversations previously or in reviews previously of Maycee Barber is that we see something more, right? We see some more adaptations to her game. Now, who has the highest ceiling? As I say, that's a very different question. And I think the answer is relatively obvious in that it is Maycee Barber, because she has such depth to a specific part of her game, which is her grappling, her pressure, these sorts of things, that if you then are able to bolt on some leg kicks, some body kicks, a real nice jab, some decent head movement, then we really are starting to look at a complete fighter for mixed martial arts. I just, in this fight, I'm very, very interested to see whether the work has actually been done. And instead, what we've seen is Maycee Barber just fighting the most efficient way for her style, which I have no problem with. But if there is holes, if there is a way that Maycee can't close the distance, she can't make it grindy and ruthless up top, and Amanda Ribas does start landing the leg kicks, and she does start hitting the hip throws, and she does start making it awkward for Maycee Barber, we've got a real fight on our hands.
Yeah, we certainly do. I'm looking forward to that one. In the just a similar trajectory has me really interested in that one in the co-main event. As we move down the card, we're going to breeze right through the next fight. That's Justin Tafa and Austin Lane in the heavyweight division. Yeah, we're not going to spend too much time on it because we're going to move on to the 145-pound division, Harry, and that's David Onama versus Gabriel Santos. And this, my friend, has banger alert written all over it. Obviously, we've seen David Onama. He's coming back off of a majority decision loss over Nate Landwehr. We've seen Nate Landwehr progress and compete against Dan Ige, so that's not necessarily a bad loss. Onama is a... Are you excited for this to see what kind of level of progression that Onama is going to show after that defeat from Landwehr? Like, what makes you so excited to see him in there on Saturday night, Harry?
I'm excited to see both fighters. This to me is just brilliant match.
Let's talk about Onama first, and then we'll talk about we can talk about Santos maybe. Just
Absolutely.
kind of, yeah. Sorry, that's why I didn't lead you in that way. It's all good.
No problem. I think for me, Onama is a guy that clearly has all of the physical capabilities. He's got range, he's got power, he can fight everywhere. I just think the problem is it's just experience, right? Like, it's just being in there with good level guys, with a good team around him, out in glory. And it's just cage time. It's just experience. It's just figuring out who he is. Now, that's difficult at 29 years of age, right? But he's only 12 fights into his pro MMA career. And so there's obviously still time, and we're not calling a halt on him. I still think he's a prospect, but I just think he has a really exciting forward-facing style. And Nate Landwehr is a really tough matchup for his kind of style, because Onama wants to go out, he wants to fight on the front foot, he wants to pressure you, he wants to land big shots. And Nate Landwehr is like bread. You just hit him and he just keeps coming back, you know? Like,
yeah,
it's just
Dan Ige found that out at the Vancouver card. And I mean, in terms of matchup now, and hindsight is a great thing as well. Like, that Landwehr fight seems a little bit unfair to Onama, but I guess he had impressed in his previous win against Garrett Armfield. But I'd find, like, Landwehr is not nowhere near top 15 level guy, but he's going to be kind of maybe a gatekeeper there for a couple of fights, perhaps. And maybe it was just a little bit too much too soon for Onama. But his opponent, I mean, yeah, his opponent came in against Leron Murphy in the last fight, and we talk about sometimes time fighters like impressing during a loss. We talked about it with Arman Saryukin when he came in against Islam. And I mean, Gabriel Santos came in and gave Murphy all that he could handle in that fight. And that's why you're excited to see this guy as well. And these two guys matched up. It's going to equal. This is going to be fought at a serious, fast pace. Talk to me about Gabriel Santos first, Harry, and why you're so excited to see him back in there again. Full camp. Good opportunity for him here.
So the primary reason I'm excited to see Gabriel Santos in is because when you're pronounced into a position like he was, which was a very short notice replacement for Lerone Murphy, obviously, unfortunately, Nathaniel Wood fell out. These things happen in MMA, whatever. You're thrust into this position, which is you're in the UFC and you've taken a pretty tough first fight. I'm very high on Lerone Murphy. I think most of us are here at SevereMMA. And so the UFC, you can go in with literally no worries because the UFC generally, as we've talked about before, will look after fighters that go in, take a tough matchup for their first one, and just roll the dice and see what happens. But he went out and he really gave Lerone Murphy some problems. There was an offering everywhere in the grappling department on both offensive and defensively. He hits really hard. He's got a really nice array of strikes. And the reason why I like this is because Onama has obviously fought in the UFC a number of times now, but he's still trying to figure out who he is. Well, now I get to ask the question of, was the fight against Lerone Murphy one of those things where it's there's absolutely no pressure on me whatsoever. I'm just going to go out here, do my thing and see what happens. Or is Gabriel Santos actually that level? And so for David Onama, and I'm just going to slightly justify the Nate Landwehr thing because I had a point to make, but I didn't want to interrupt, is with Onama's age, you kind of have to roll the dice a little.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's fair. That's definitely fair to say. Yeah.
And like, I agree with you that in hindsight, it was too much too soon, but you kind of have to find out, right? At 28, 29 years of age, let's chuck him in. And if he goes out and destroys Nate Landwehr like Dan Ige did, all right, you're probably seeing David Onama fight Dan Ige next, right? It's that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Whereas here, this is in terms of rankings, in terms of UFC experience, this is a step back for David Onama, but this actually is a brilliant two prospects coming together. Who's the better prospect, right? And we're absolutely going to find out. And this has fight of the night stamped all the way over it.
How confident are you maybe shining the light on one of these two gentlemen, whoever gets the win on you know, obviously you do the severe spotlight. Is there anyone that like if Gabriel Santos was to go out there and get the win in impressive fashion? I mean, he's definitely one to look out for in the 145-pound division. You could be looking at maybe a Nate Landwehr test after that. Again, obviously his age is helping him out a lot more at only 26, I believe. Is he 20? Yeah, 26. So it's super interesting fight in the featherweight division. Anything else to add on this before we move on?
No, I think we're good. I'm just really excited for this one.
Yeah, I'm feeding off your excitement here. Brendan Allen versus Bruno Silva in the 185-pound division. That'll open up the main card. Brendan Allen, we've talked about him time and time again, Harry. It's like we don't know which Brendan Allen is going to show up, because when the good version of the Brendan Allen shows up, he can be quite dangerous. But when the bad version show up, he kind of can be put out of there rather easily. How do you think, or what kind of Brendan Allen do you feel that we're going to see when Bruno Silva kind of steps in and implements his game plan there on Saturday night?
I actually think this is a nice matchup for Bruno Silva. The performance against Brad Tavares was very interesting. I really liked the setup to the knee and the punches, because Brad Tavares just doesn't really get finished that often. You know, the last finish I can really remember is the Edmund Shabazian knockout. And even then we were all like, fuck me, Brad Tavares doesn't get finished. And here's Edmund just blasting his head into Rosette. So I was very impressed, but the performance against Gerald Meerschaert wasn't great. I thought the IQ of his performance against Alex Pereira was absolutely horrendous. Like, you go in with a world-renowned kickboxer and you don't try and take him down once. Like, what? You're a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, supposedly. Like, what are we doing? But for Brendan Allen, I think that his athleticism and his power is going to be a little bit too much here. And we kind of saw that against Andre Muniz, right? Who Muniz is one of those boa constrictor type fighters where if he gets a hold of you in a good position, it's really difficult to get him off you. But Brendan Allen just kind of bulldozed him a little bit. And I feel like a similar type of game plan here would work well for him. But obviously, Bruno Silva's a tricky southpaw and he's got some things and he's got some tools in his arsenal. So I think, again, for Brendan Allen, this is kind of the UFC saying, here's another IQ test for you. You probably should go and get this done. But Bruno Silva is going to offer you some looks. He's going to offer you some weapons that you're absolutely going to need to be defensively aware of.
Yeah, I think that finish of Brad Tavares in Silva's last fight was a surprise based off the two performances that we just mentioned against Bahia and Gerald Meerschaert. So, I mean, that's probably a blessing in disguise for Brendan Allen here, he'll be wary of that power as well moving forward. I mean, for Brendan Allen now, I feel he has to kind of push on here. 27 years of age. We need to start getting wins under your belt. We need to start building yourself into the division too, because we've seen and time again, he's been getting himself there, but then letting himself down. But like you said, this is a very winnable fight for Brendan Allen. And I feel that if he goes out there, gets another impressive win, that would be Muniz, that would be Bruno Silva. We're probably going to be putting him up there against ranked opponents pretty soon. You had some else? What else do you have to say? Sorry.
Just on the Brendan Allen thing, like I actually completely agree with what you're saying about performances. But the one thing I'll just underline is even when he has a bad performance, a lot of the time he still finds a way to make it through, right? Like, and if we look at the sort of the resume of people that he's lost to, well, Fluffy Hernandez is one back in LFA, and we can see now there's not a lot of problems with that. Sean Strickland, again, elite level fighter at middleweight, however you want to determine that. And then Chris Curtis is no easy out either. So I completely agree with you that we need to see performances, but I just wanted to underline that just a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. But like, I mean, that also highlights a flaw as well, whereas that he's getting to a certain level and, it's just not happening for him. Obviously, he was supposed to go in here against Jack Hermanson. And that bout was cancelled. But you look at Bruno Silva is a good test right now. It's a chance for him to go in and get another win. But yeah, could be getting to the business end of things for Brendan Allen once he gets over this, if he gets over this as well. We kind of talked about Neil Magny and Phil Rowe in the welterweight division, Harry, before this fight. And I think some of the magic of this fight kind of was taken away, like I said, because Ian Garry has now been matched up with Jeff Neal. Obviously, there would have been a little bit of Irish interest here on Neil Magny if he could get the win, which might have set up that fight. But I mean, now I guess the story or the narrative of this fight is that if Phil Rowe can come in here, can he get over the Neil Magny test? Because if he does, a win over Neil Magny means that you have a big stake in that welterweight division. So, I mean, obviously you don't maybe have the same Irish interest as myself, but obviously the prospect test, I think overall with Ian Garry getting matched with Jeff Neal is probably a better matchup for him. Neil Magny versus Phil Rowe. Has Phil Rowe taken up the Ian Garry kind of mantle here? Can he take some of that shine if he beats Neil Magny, or do you fancy him to do it, or do you care?
I mean, I care. I think this is, Neil Magny is one of those guys who we appreciate and respect so much for what he is. And when he's touted alongside the name of Ian Garry, who is somebody that we're looking desperately at having a similar enough test to what Neil Magny can pose, that's really exciting, right? Because if Neil Magny goes out and puts a clinic on Ian Garry, well, then we know right away that Ian Garry is not what we thought he was, or at least he's not what we thought he was right now. And so there's some rebuild to go away and there's some stuff to happen. Well, 32-year-old Phil Rowe, 32-year-old Phil Rowe that, essentially took 2 years off MMA to go and do some grappling things against Gordon Ryan and Cody Steele and these kind of names who are big in the grappling scene is one thing. Now, you lose to Gabe Green, who we know isn't a great fighter, is no longer in the UFC. You go out and beat Orion Kosuke, who, again, not a great fighter. Jason Witt, not a great fighter. Nico Price is a good win, but that was pretty much just a slobber knocker until Nico Price couldn't do anything anymore, and then Phil Rowe knocked him out. And so I kind of, and this is a really rude thing to say, I think, but I'll say it. I'm just not sure what Phil Rowe's done to earn a Neil Magny performance.
Very
like
fair, very fair statement, to be honest.
32
Very
years
fair.
of age. It's not like he's going to be ranked at welterweight. It's not like, we're going to see him in an ascension to a title. And so I kind of feel like it's a bit of a waste of a Neil Magny performance, who we know, and look, maybe this is just a little bit harsh on Neil Magny, who, look, he's probably going to go in and win this, right? Like, he'd probably go in and teep Phil Rowe and take him down and do the things. But
and maybe that's what the UFC want, Harry. I mean, maybe, look, he's a recognized name. He's somewhat of a gatekeeper to the 70-pound division. You're after going out there, you're after losing via a triangle choke to Gilbert Burns in one round. This is more of a chance for Neil Magny to come in, get a win, be relevant again, where, you can maybe try and build someone else's name off of him. Because, Phil, it's a very fair statement. He hasn't done all that much. And, it's a huge opportunity for Philip Rowe here, coming in here to try and beat a guy. But I'm of the same opinion as you. I don't really think he has the skills to kind of get over Neil Magny, and I see Neil Magny getting this win, moving on, and that's what we're going to do as well. To the 170-pound division, again, Randy Brown versus Wellington Turman. Like I said, very, very excited to see Randy Brown coming back off of that disappointing loss in Jack Della Maddalena. He'll be very disappointed. He was on kind of a good run ahead of that fight. And it was, two prospects coming up to try and break into the top 10. He'll be coming here with the grip between his teeth, I think, Harry, to kind of come in and put a good performance against Wellington Turman. And I think this is a good stylistic matchup. Obviously, Wellington is moving down to the 175 or 70-pound division. And that makes this a little bit more interesting as well. Your thoughts, please?
I'm excited for this because on one hand, I'd like to see Wellington Turman at 170. He's a very, very big human. Like when he fought Andrew Sanchez at 185, he was an absolute monster. And so let me just state this, if you didn't know, fuck weight cutting, right? So I'm interested to see Wellington Turman at 170. I hope he can make it safely. I hope that he can do it and have full energy for the fight against Randy Brown, because Randy Brown is a tough out, long, hits hard, has some really nice scrambling, could do the grappling, could do all of the things. And so for me, this is a Wellington Turman nowhere near the level of Jack Della Maddalena, and so Randy Brown can rebuild and start again. And we mentioned Jack Della Maddalena. Like, I'd have seen that fight for Neil Magny. Give me that fight over the fight against Phil Rowe, and do Phil Rowe versus Randy Brown, right? Like, do something like that instead of what we have right now. But however, I expect Randy Brown to go out and be better than Wellington Turman. I think the size and strength advantage that Turman is probably going to have is really interesting to me. Can Randy Brown utilize his range? Can he use his distance? Can he use his superior striking, in my opinion, to win this fight? Can he, do the things and get back on the horse? I don't know. We're going to find out. But if Randy Brown goes out there and wins, well, that's a person, again, we could probably elevate to a Neil Magny-esque, or maybe one before a Neil Magny-esque type performance. But yeah, interest on both sides of this for me.
Absolutely. I'm very interested too. Randy Brown can go in there and cause a lot of problems in the 170-pound division when he's on. And I just think that he met a real juggernaut in Jack Della Maddalena in his last fight. And we don't need to say how excited we're to see his next fight in a little while as well. Mateusz Rebecki versus Luke Rajabov is the next in line on the prelims card. Look at Rebecki coming in here at 17-1, win over Nick Fiore in his last fight. I don't rate Nick Fiore that much, to be honest. I think that was should have been a routine win for him that he won by unanimous decision. Rajabov coming over, obviously, from the PFL. We spoke about him before. He has started his UFC with a unanimous decision win over Esteban Rajcevic. Not too much to say about this, Harry. Two guys that are, I would struggle probably to see cracking the top 15 of the lightweight division right now. Is that too harsh of an assessment?
I don't think so. I think for me, the big question coming in here is, was the performance against Nick Fiore just UFC jitters for Rebecca? And is there more to offer? Or is that the level? That's really the big question I have for this fight. Radzhabov's going to come in and we'll see what, because he has the same thing, right? He comes in, gets a unanimous decision win in his performance, no problem. Let's just see where both of these guys lay out. They're going to be probably outside of the top 15 fighters, right? And let's see where they land. I got no problem with the fight. I think it's good matchmaking. We'll just see how it goes.
Absolutely. Let's touch on Tabitha Ritchie versus Gillian Robinson. We have seen Gillian move down to the 115-pound division from the 125. Kind of maybe to rejuvenate. It was I always want to think it was stemmed off that grappling win over Rose Namajunas, where she probably thought that she could compete. You're not buying into the fairy tale of Gillian Robinson down at 115. You don't think that she's going to be able to go in there and kind of implement her grappling game here against Tabitha Ritchie. Why do you feel Tabitha Ritchie is going to get her hand raised on Saturday night, Harry?
Well, I just think that Tabitha Ritchie is more ferocious. She looks to snatch up submissions. She's happy enough off her back as she is on top. And we know that Gillian Robertson is not a great striker. She's not great on her back. But if she gets you to positions where she is comfortable, which is either pressing you up against the fence, looking to grapple, looking to tire you out, or you laying on your back, playing some form of guard and her passing and striking, she's fantastic. She's absolutely fantastic. I can't take anything away from her in those positions. But it's getting fighters to those positions 3 times, essentially. And we have seen more often than not that when it doesn't go her way, she gets destroyed. She gets absolutely destroyed. And so, I don't know. I personally am a fan of Gillian Robertson in that when she's on and she's in her wheelhouse, she's a fantastic fighter. But we're talking again about modern MMA as we were at the start, and having a skill set so limited, just can't survive in modern MMA. And so if she can come out and if she can go after some wins and if she can get Tabitha Ritchie down and if she can manage the ferocity and manage the striking, she can absolutely win this fight. I just struggle to see it happening.
Yeah, we talked about it before in kind of modern mixed martial arts. We see fighters who are able to kind of gel all the separate skills together oh so well. And it's all those in-between bits that are so important in getting a win. And I do agree with you what you're saying, where that we haven't seen the kind of gel and techniques from Gillian Robertson yet coming in here. But, you never know. She's still progressing. She's still learning. She's still developing. But I do feel Tabitha Ritchie is kind of a horrible stylistic matchup for her. I think she's going to be stronger. She's going to be able to keep the fight on the feet. But I don't know. I'm kind of semi-bought into Gillian Robinson until, like, a loss comes, which could be this Saturday night, so it could be over before it starts. But it definitely will be interesting to see. Harry, Zaglis Samagulov, his haircut is absolutely fantastic coming in here. Talk to me about that, my good man.
Me and Zalgas don't have a fantastic relationship, mostly because he just fouls everyone. But look, he's taking on Joshua Van. I will say he has been incredibly unlucky. Nate Maness has to pull out, Estevam has to pull out, and then Philippe Buns pulls out on fight week. Like just awful, rotten luck for him. But you go out, you get whacked by Manel Cape, you lose a split decision to Jeff Molina, you lose a split decision to Charles Johnson. Like, that's kind of who Zalgas is, right? He's a gritty, awkward, really difficult fighter to get clean wins over, but it's just not a great fighter. He sits down on his punches really, really, really hard, swings massively, can do a bit of the grappling, but, it's just not somebody that I'm grasping to watch, right? And so Joshua Van has a really, really big opportunity here. He's got a very tough fight on his hands. I've not had a chance to go back and watch tape on him, but we're going to see, right? We're going to see. Looks like a finisher from his record, but finishing on, the regional shows and then doing so in the UFC over somebody like Zalgas is a very, very different thing. So big opportunity for him here. Let's see what he does with it.
Big opportunity for Jose Marical coming in here as well. He's taken on Trevor Peek undefeated and bringing in a pretty impressive finishing record here, Harry. Definitely one to kind of keep an eye on the prelims, especially when you're coming in there with that finishing record that Trevor Peek has. And, he's coming in here against fresh opposition. Marical Kane kind of coming in here from the LFA. And it's a tough test, but it's like, this is the bottom tier guys that we maybe need to keep an eye on that have to stake their claim in the division. So yeah, there's very, very early in their UFC careers, but I'm definitely keeping one eye on Peak given his finishing ability.
Agreed. This is the right fight for both of them, right? Both debutantes. And let's just see, right? There's absolutely no shame in these type of fights. This is exactly where they should be fighting. Both coming off some very, very impressive wins in terms of how they're finishing fights. That's exactly what the UFC are looking for. And so fair play to both of them. I think Peak, from what I have seen, has a slightly higher ceiling, and I'm a little bit more excited to see him, as are you. And so we'll see how this plays out. But, this is an opportunity for both of these gentlemen to come out and just stake a bit of a claim for themselves in this division.
Indeed it is. But look, we're talking about excitement. It's been a big theme of this card and this preview so far. And we've got a guy that we have been excited about in the past, and we're very excited to see in there. And that's Tatsuro Taira, 13-0. He's coming in here to face Cledson Rodriguez. This is a fantastic stylistic matchup as well. Like, this is two good up-and-coming prospects coming up in the 125-pound division. Obviously, Cledson Rodriguez coming back off of his first-round win over Shannon Ross. But I think the body of work that we've seen from Tatsuro Taira in the UFC and his last win against Jesus Aguilar, we need to stand and take notice of this one. We've tried to tell you ever since he's made his UFC debut a couple of fights back. We've seen him in there 3 times now, Harry, and this Taira is a real problem in the 125-pound division. And I'm not too sure how many people know about it yet, but this is another good opportunity for him to come in against Cledson Rodriguez. He's a tough guy, but another winnable fight for Taira. When you're looking at a guy like him, Harry, what are the main attributes that stand out for you in his game?
Everything. He's quick.
Is he an example of, to you, a modern day mixed martial artist?
100%.
Yeah.
He's quick. Now, this isn't to say he doesn't make mistakes, right? He absolutely makes mistakes. He's rushed positions. He's lost positions. He's made, young. But he's so young, but his ceiling is so high. This kid is the absolute truth. And I would be remiss and shocked if within the next 5 years, he's not wearing some form of gold around his waist. Because we are looking at a guy.
That's big for you to say as well, because you normally
ever said that about any fighter.
I'm blown away because normally you're after swapping seats with me there. Normally I'm the one who gets excited and looks too far into the future. But tell me why, Harry.
Because he just understands fighting. Like, you can tell with the way he moves his feet, with the way he moves his head, the shot selection, the prowess on the ground, the ability to snatch up submissions, the ability to transition from positions to submission and back again, his ability to chain submission attacks together and then land damage in between all of those things is just unbelievable to watch. And so when I look at somebody like Tatsuro Taira and I say he's still 23 years of age, it's mind-boggling. Now, this test is a really interesting one because Cledson Rodriguez is an extremely fast starter and Tatsuro Taira has been found out to be a slow starter in his last couple of performances. He ramped it up a little in his last performance against Jesus Aguilar, but in the CJ Vieira fight and even in the Carlos Candelario fight, that first 30 seconds, 35 seconds, he doesn't do his best work. Right, he just sort of takes some time to grow into it. Well, Cledson Rodriguez is absolutely out there to finish you as quickly as possible. And so how Tatsuro Taira manages that type of ferocity and pace early is going to be very telling, and is going to be telling as to, has he been able to really zone in and find out that this is the type of thing I need to be doing to be successful in this division. I don't mind the level matchup, and I would not mind keeping him just slowly creeping up the divisional ladder, because as I say, he's 23. There's absolutely no need to rush. But I think within the next 18 months, we are seeing a significant ranking next to his name and some extremely intriguing fights for Tatsuto Taira.
Yeah, really looking forward to seeing his progression. Obviously came in with a high finish rate, has continued that in 3 fights, 2 finishes out of 3 as well. And, you know, a young kid finding his way into the UFC, very, very dangerous prospect. Give that all to me. But look, you mentioned one of the things that might hinder him a little bit in this fight, and that is a slow start. If you're Tiara's coach here and you know you're coming in against a guy like Cledson Rodriguez, who's going to be up there closing that distance and in your face, do you tell him to be patient? Do you tell him, you know, just don't do anything silly for the first couple of minutes, but also you're going to have to balance that kind of responsibility with getting the respect of the Brazilian in there as well? When you're someone's coach, is that kind of the message you're trying to kind of deliver over there? You know, you want to start fast, but you don't want to start too fast where you might get clipped. And, you know, it's all those little intricacies that make fighting so beautiful to watch for me anyway. And it's those little questions in between. What are you kind of seeing when you would come up against a fighter that's going to start fast when you're known as a slow starter per se?
I would be asking Tatsuto Taira to try to pressure Cledson Rodriguez with footwork and land as many jabs as possible, and then just see where the fight takes him. Because what's probably going to happen is Rodriguez is going to try and look for massive swings over the top if Tatsuto Taira is able to initiate enough pressure footwork. And then Tatsuto Taira will counter him and counter him well. Because it's not that his timing is off. I just think it takes him a little bit of a minute to warm up into fights. But I suspect that if the opportunities arise and present themselves, he will take them. And for me, that is the thing that I would be asking to do, is just make sure that you're forward facing, make sure that when the leg kicks come, you check them, or if you can, just catch one and run him down, and then just ask him to get back up, and just show him very early on as much as possible that he's in an actual fight here, and let him know as soon as possible that there are a lot of weapons coming back. And so Cledson Rodriguez will need to be aware of them and manage his own defensive capabilities.
That's a very, very good assessment. And that wraps us up for the preview show this week. Another great one, another bunch of fights looking to look forward to. Josh Emmett, Ilia Topuria in the main event. Will it be a new challenger to kind of set the tone for Alex Volkanovski and his title reign? I don't know, with the featherweight division, I feel that Volkanovski kind of needs to move on for that kind of division to flourish a little bit, but that's a conversation for another day. Will Ilia Topuria be the newest challenger there? Can Josh Emmett hold firm on his position in the rankings? It'll be interesting to see Amanda Ribas versus Macy Barber in the co-main event. We will be back to break down all of these fights next Tuesday on the Balance Breakdown. You can follow Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell. You can follow me at IO'Neill MMA. Find all of our stuff over on our social medias on SevereMMA.com. You take care. You enjoy the fights, and we'll see you all next week to break them all down. Take care, folks.